How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to the Changeup. Now, baseball's a hard game. The pure skill involved in hitting a rock traveling at 90 plus miles an hour with 14 inches of horizontal break is unmatched by almost any other sport. And on the fielding side of things, it's not much different. A decision made in a split second can be the difference between a highlight reel catch and a double up the gap. MLB players consistently make the very challenging look easy, most of the time. You see, not all world-class athletes are created equal. For every MLB player that makes it look easy, there are some that make it look a little less easy. Seeing as how the Gold Glove Awards were just announced pretty recently, I figured today we'd take a look at some of the worst defenders in the league this past year and award them with a glove not made of gold, but of tinfoil. These are your 2025 Tinfoil Glove Award winners. First off, we'll take a look at the National League and their worst defensive catcher, Agustin Ramirez. Now, simply put, Ramirez just is going to have to get better if he's going to stick at the catching position, as he put up a negative 13 fielding run value last year, which is first percentile in the MLB. His defensive woes last year were highlighted by his negative 28 blocks above average, which is by far the worst in baseball. He was also sitting at a negative 10 caught stealing above average as well. Now, at the core of it, I think Ramirez's problem stems from the fact that he tries to overframe the ball. His effort to steal strikes by snatching the ball up quickly back into the strike zone usually results on him whiffing on the ball entirely. Now, Ramirez is a young guy with plenty of time to improve, but this is a situation that needs to be monitored by the Marlins pretty closely. If he's going to put up a negative 13 fielding run value every year, they need to consider moving him to either DH or first base. On to the first baseman for the NL, and it's got to be Pete Alonso. Pete's going to be negotiating a contract here pretty soon, and I'm sure his defensive metrics are going to be something he tries to keep out of those conversations. Pete was rocking a negative 8 fielding run value last year with a negative 9 OAA and 5th percentile arm strength. Simply put, Pete's not very good at first base. That being said, he's weirdly not too bad at picking the ball, it's just the rest of the position that he struggles with. On to the second baseman for the NL, and it's got to be Luis Garcia Jr. There's not really much to say about Garcia other than he wasn't very good. He had a negative 4 fielding run value and pretty terrible range at negative 7 as well. And while arm strength isn't the most significant thing for a second baseman, he was 17th percentile, so not very good. And not that offensive stats really factor into this at all, but the fact that he took a step back offensively this year from last year makes it that much more challenging for the Nationals to justify putting him out there every day. Garcia's still very young, he's got time to improve, but last year was not a very good year for him defensively. On to the winner for shortstops, and it has to be CJ Abrams. Man, this dude was really bad last year. Negative 9 fielding run value, negative 11 OAA, mid arm strength, not a great year for CJ. We're getting to a point where the Nationals might really need to consider moving him off of shortstop. But hey, maybe I'm being a little too hard on the guy. I mean, he is pretty young, and he did improve defensively from last year, so that's good. Up next, we got the third base winner, and it's going to be Mark Vientos. Vientos just wasn't very good last year. The things he did well on offense last year, he didn't do well this year, and defensively, he's just as bad as ever. Negative 6 fielding run value, negative 7 OAA, and middling arm strength make him a tough one to start at third base. Especially when you got Brett Beatty on the team, who was essentially just the better Mark Vientos all of last year. Vientos is going to really need to make some improvements either with the glove or the more likely answer, the bat, if he's going to get some playing time next year. For the left fielder in the National League, I have Elliot Ramos. Ramos is kind of like the Vientos of the outfield, where his glove is always going to be pretty bad, but if he's hitting, you kind of just don't care. And last year was no different. Elliot was pretty good with the bat and pretty bad with the glove. He had a negative 11 fielding run value, a negative 9 OAA, and 5th percentile arm value. So he was pretty bad. An interesting note to make is that in 2024, he actually had a much better run value while playing the majority of his games in center field, which is weird. I'm not totally sure why his stats dropped off a cliff after moving to an easier position, but who knows. Next up, we got our center fielder for the National League and Ramos' teammate, Jung-Hoo Lee. Now, Mickey Moniak graded out worse than Lee, but realistically, Moniak's not a center fielder. He also played far fewer games in center field, so I ultimately went with Lee. Realistically, Lee wasn't too bad in center field last year. He had 87th percentile arm value and 91st percentile arm strength. His downfall was really just the range. He had a negative 5 OAA, which puts him in the 11th percentile for all of MLB. This ultimately gave him a fielding run value of negative 2, which honestly isn't really too bad, but center fielders are usually some of the best fielders in baseball, so for a guy to have a negative 2 fielding run value, it's not the best. And finally, we have our right field winner for the National League, Juan Soto. Soto was horrible in the field last year, which obviously isn't really why you paid the dude $765 million, but I'm sure the Mets were hoping to get a few more years out of him in the field before he got that bad. Now, of course, Soto's never really been good in the field at all, which makes his famous 2022 Gold Glove nomination all the more hilarious with his whopping -17 fielding run value that year. But that being said, he had improved a little bit in 2024, putting up a 0 fielding run value and a -4 OAA en route to his second Gold Glove nomination. Very well deserved. So, Mets fans, hopefully Soto can go back to his Gold Glove ways next year. Or maybe he already did this year. Moving on to the AL, and the worst defensive catcher for the American League was Logan O'Hoppe. Now, technically Edgar Caro had a worse fielding run value at -15 versus O'Hoppe's -11, but Caro's main problem was the framing, which as we know will become less and less relevant as the years go on. O'Hoppe, on the other hand, was just pretty bad at everything. Blocks above average, he was 6th percentile, caught stealing above average 15th, framing 13th, and pop time 10th. He was just really bad last year. Now again, he's an example of a guy that wasn't very good the year prior either, but if he's going to stick at catcher, he's got to make some improvements to his defensive game. Next up for the American League first baseman, I have Vinny Pasquantino. Now this was also kind of a toss-up between Vinny and Nick Kurtz, but I ultimately went with Vinny because his range is slightly worse. Vinny's another one of those dudes who's not really that bad defensively, and if he's hitting, you can kind of forget about it entirely, but he's still not great with a -4 fielding run value. All in all, though, for a first baseman, not the most important position defensively, I think he does a fine job. Moving on to second base, and I've got Brandon Lowe. Lowe and Jonathan India both were pretty terrible last year, but Lowe had worse arm strength, which isn't the most important metric for second base, but it was slightly worse. Lowe came in with a -9 fielding run value, a -13 OAA, and a 14th percentile arm strength. So yeah, all in all, not very good. Second base isn't the most important position defensively on the diamond, but with metrics like that, they might need to reconsider playing him there. For the AL shortstop winner, we have another impending free agent, Bo Bichette. Now, when you hear about Bichette signing as a second baseman instead of a shortstop, these defensive metrics might shine some light as to why that is. -10 fielding run value, -13 OAA, which is first percentile, and below average arm strength as well. Simply put, Bichette probably is not a shortstop at this point in his career. Now, whether or not he's going to get paid the shortstop money, who really knows? But even if Toronto were to re-sign him, there might need to be some long-term discussions on having Jimenez take over shortstop for him. For the American League's third baseman, I have Yoan Moncada. Now, Moncada had a pretty decent year last year if you look at anything but his defensive metrics. Defensively, he was terrible. -9 fielding run value, -13 OAA first percentile, and well below average arm strength. Moncada, like a lot of these other guys, is probably just not a third baseman at this point in his career. If you're putting up a -13 OAA at third base, it's probably just time to move to a different position. Up next for right field, we have our second Ray and our second Low/Low, Josh Lowe. Josh Lowe, similar to Brandon Lowe, was not very good last year. -5 fielding run value, -4 OAA, and a -2 arm value, putting him squarely below average in all those metrics. The Rays are going to have to do some serious work on their defense in the coming years, seeing as how Chandler Simpson was also pretty bad in the field. Some of it could be that they're playing in a minor league ballpark, maybe the guys aren't used to it yet, but either way, something's got to improve there. In center field, we've got Joe Adell. Now remember all that time ago when I said this? This ultimately gave him a fielding run value of -2, which honestly isn't really too bad, but center fielders are usually some of the best fielders in baseball, so for a guy to have a -2 fielding run value, it's not the best. I guess Joe Adell didn't get the memo on that. Adell had an atrocious -13 fielding run value, which is first percentile in baseball, a -12 OAA, which is also first percentile, and to top it all off, he was below average with the arm as well. Adell, simply put, was one of the worst defenders in all of baseball last year, not even just among center fielders. The Angels really got to figure out what they're doing there. I know they had to move Mike Trout to right field and DH because of his health, but Adell just can't be starting in center field next year. He did sneakily hit 37 homers, though, this year, so shout out Joe Adell. And finally, for the American League left fielder, we have the richest contract in White Sox history, Andrew Benintendi. Benintendi just really isn't very good. -10 fielding run value, -8 OAA, very bad arm strength, just not very good in general. The White Sox really don't spend money very often, and seeing as how he was the richest contract in franchise history, that's got to sting a little bit. Sorry, White Sox fans. And with that, those are your 2025 Tinfoil Glove Award winners. Now, it's worth mentioning that a lot of these guys are fantastic hitters, so it does kind of balance out their shortcomings on defense. And all of these guys are professional athletes, so they're way more talented than I or anyone watching this more than likely will be in baseball. Thank you everybody so much for watching. It really does mean a lot to me. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to be posting a bunch more baseball content just like this, so make sure to stay tuned. Until next time, guys, thank you for watching.